She never planned to stop at the thrift store. She never planned to find her face smiling from behind glass. "This keeps happening," she whispered. Year after year, another wedding photo. Different poses, same dress, same face, hers. She had never been a bride, never stood in a chapel, never kissed the blurred man in the photo. But someone had made sure she would see it again and again. She asked the shopkeeper where it came from. He just said, "Same man as always, leaves it, never speaks." But this time, he left a letter, said you're finally ready. The first drop of rain hit her wrist as she reached for the shop's door. She paused, just long enough to register how cold it felt, like touching something that had already forgotten her. The bell above the door gave a brittle chime, more broken wind chime than welcome. Inside, the air smelled like damp paper and old wood, like a place that hadn't been visited by time in a while. She hadn't meant to come in. It was just the rain. Just the way the clouds looked like they were carrying something heavier than the weather. The thrift store was a mess of lives, half-lived broken mirrors, chipped porcelain, cassette tapes labeled in faded pen. She walked slowly, fingers grazing. Over sweater sleeves, glassware, frames with strangers' faces locked inside. But then, halfway down a narrow aisle, her breath caught on glass dot. It was tilted, the frame, crooked against a stack of old cookbooks and a vase full of artificial lily. But she saw it instantly. The bride, the veil, the scar beneath her collarbone, her dot smiling, holding a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. Eyes soft, familiar. But she had never worn that dress, never stood in that pose, never smiled like that beside a man with a blurred-out face. As if someone had run a thumb across the photo in anger, the frame trembled as she picked it up. No price tag. Just a single post-it note on the back, claimed, written in a hand she hadn't seen in 7 years. Her heart dropped once, clean and hard. Then again, in slow echoes, she turned toward the counter, where a small man with wiry glasses was unpacking a box of mismatched cups. He didn't look up when he spoke. He drops one off every April. Same photo, different pose, always you. Her lips parted, but no sound arrived. This year he left something else, the man added, reaching under the counter. Said you're ready now. He placed the envelope in her palm like it might break. It was ivory, sealed in wax, and on the back, in looping script, Ellis, her middle name. Almost no one knew that dot. She left the store without paying. The photo, still in her hand, the envelope tucked into her coat. The rain had stopped, but everything still felt soaked. At home, she made tea just to have something to hold. The cup rattled slightly against the saucer. Her reflection in the window looked wrong, like someone in costume. She opened the envelope with a letter opener she hadn't used since her father's funeral. Inside was another photo. She didn't breathe. It was her again, but different. Her face was fuller. Her hands cradled a small swell beneath silk. The same veil, the same dress, but unmistakably pregnant. In the corner of the photo, written in that same familiar hand, 7 months. We almost made it. She dropped the cup. Porcelain cracked against tile. Tea soaked into the hem of her jeans. She didn't notice. There was a torn receipt tucked behind the photo. From a motel in Clearwater, paid in cash. April 2009. She was 16. That year, heartbeat hooked. She rose, walked to the mirror above the fireplace, stared into it like it owed her something. The scar was there, still raised, still shaped like a hook. She touched it lightly, as if it could whisper the truth. Her phone rang, a number she hadn't saved, but one she knew. Her mother's landline. She didn't answer. Not yet. She looked again at the photo, at the small curve of life beneath the dress, at the slight shift in her own smile. There were 2 names scrawled on the back. Ellis, April. Jonah, pending. One name stayed. One name vanished. But neither belonged to who she thought. She walked to the kitchen, pulled the junk drawer open, dug past rubber bands and dead batteries. Found what she didn't realize she'd kept. A key, old, rusted, marked with a tiny heart she hadn't seen. It in years, didn't know what it opened. But her hand closed around it like a memory. The rain started again. She didn't notice some names are scars. Others become songs. She remembered the way her father wrote her name on birthday cards, sharp at the corners, like he was trying to keep the letters from slipping away. That same penmanship curled now across the back of the envelope, almost gentle. Ellis. It shouldn't have been possible. He'd been buried under a willow tree 7 years ago. She'd scattered half his ashes. The rest sat in a wooden urn in the guest room no one used. But the handwriting was his. Not just similar his. And the photo inside, that was her face. Her dress, her hands curved over a body not yet hers. A dress stretched slightly at the waist, a belly rounding beneath lace. Eyes turned slightly to the side, as if watching. Someone just outside the frame. No wedding ring. No chapel she recognized. Just her, looking more like herself than she felt now. She turned the photo over. The date read April 2009. That year was fog. She remembered a school hallway, the scent of bleach, then nothing. Just a soft, inexplicable ache that refused to name itself. Heartbeat hook. She touched the scar on her collarbone, traced it like a familiar prayer. Same shape, same depth. It stared back at her from the photo like proof. The man beside her was blurred, deliberately, not by the camera, by someone's hand. A smear that dragged across his face like a decision. The edge of the photo was torn, uneven. She noticed it had been folded once, then flattened again. Like someone had carried it in a wallet, then tried to pretend it hadn't mattered. On the table beside her, the torn receipt from the last frame still sat beneath the chipped locket she'd unearthed from the attic. She hadn't opened it yet. Some things resist fingertips. She looked again at the handwriting. Her father's. The same man who used to hum when he made toast, who called her my bright one when she cried. The same man who once said, if you ever feel lost, leave breadcrumbs behind. I'll find you. She picked up her phone, stared at the screen. The name glared back. Mama contact she hadn't called in 3 years. The last time they spoke, it ended with glass shattering and silence thicker than grief. But silence doesn't erase the truth. It only hides it better. She pressed call. Each ring felt like a countdown. Her mother's voice arrived too calm, like she already knew. Ellis? Silence held for a beat. Did he send you something? Her mother asked, not even waiting for a greeting. I thought he was dead. I thought you wanted him to be. Heartbeat hooked. The line trembled between them. Neither breathed. Her mother whispered something. A name, but the static swallowed it. I need answers, Ellis said. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. There's a reason we never told you, her mother said. A reason he kept sending those. He couldn't carry it alone. I was pregnant, Ellis said flatly. You let me forget. A long silence. Then, soft as unraveling thread, you weren't meant to remember. It wasn't supposed to come back. What wasn't? Her mother's breath hitched. There's more, she said. There's always more. The call ended. The locket finally gave way beneath her thumb. Inside, a piece of paper curled into the shape of grief. 2 names handwritten in soft pencil. Ellis, April. Jonah, pending. She dropped the photo. The corner cracked against the tile. Her reflection split in the hallway mirror. For a moment, she could see both halves of herself, before and after. Memory and myth. One name stayed. One name vanished. But neither belonged to who she thought. The china cup had a crack. Her mother always turned toward the wall. As a child, she'd reach for it just to see her flinch. Today, it sat on the table between them, like it had been waiting all these years. Lipstick from a stranger's mouth marking its rim. Her mother's lips were bare. Her own hands trembled. She slid the photograph across the table, eyes trained. Not on her mother's face, but the teacup. The girl in the picture looked pale, not quite herself. A hospital bed swallowed her thin frame, tubes like veins, hair cropped too short. But it was her face. Her scar, the one she'd checked. Again in the mirror this morning, curved like a question. Her mother didn't look down, just stared at her daughter like someone watching a window rattle before it shatters. "That's not me," she whispered, barely audible. "It's her, but it's not me." A pause. Then the mother sighed, slow and reluctant, as if exhaling something she had buried in her lungs for years. "You don't remember that year," she said. "We made sure of it." She wanted to scream. But silence had been their shared language since she was 12. It had a grammar now. She leaned in close. "Who is we?" A flicker barely there passed through her mother's eyes. Fear. Maybe, or guilt wearing its mask. The teacup clicked gently as her mother set it down. She folded her hands like she was praying. Or trying not to beg. "There are things you locked away. Some things should stay there." "But I didn't lock them," she said. "You did." Silence again. Longer this time. Later, after the door slammed and the hallway swallowed her echo, she sat alone in the kitchen with the photo. The scar on her arm pulsed beneath her sleeve like it had memory. She pulled out the old keepsake box her father once gave her, a scratched wooden thing, hinges loose, the smell of dust and cedar still clinging to the velvet inside. Inside were hospital discharge papers from sprained ankles, a preschool drawing of a dragon, her third-grade spelling bee ribbon. She'd dug through these before, countless times, chasing some phantom idea of wholeness. But now, with the new photo in hand, she knew what was missing. Not what had been kept, but what had been cut out. She opened her laptop, searched her school's archives. Yearbooks, enrollment files. One year was blank. No photo, no grade, no record. The cursor blinked at her like a warning light. She called. The district office. A woman answered. Polite but curt. "That name's not in the system for that academic year." "Are you sure she was enrolled?" Her mouth went dry. "I am her." A beat. Then the woman said more gently, "Sometimes names change in trauma wards." She hung up. The next morning, the envelope was already on her desk at work. No return address, just her name, typed, not handwritten this time. She didn't open it at first, just sat staring at it, letting the weight of it press on her like a second spine. When she finally tore it open, her breath caught. Another photo. Her again, different hospital room. This time the sheets were blue. She was awake but gaunt, staring at something past the lens. On her wrist a band. She zoomed in. The name said, Jane Doe. Her coffee spilled onto the desk, but she didn't move, just stared. Her reflection in the darkened screen split her face. One half was her now makeup, war paint, control. The other haunted, undone. Some names are scars. Others become songs. She didn't know which one she was holding. She opened the drawer and pulled out the locket. It had been her grandmother's. Inside, no photo. Just a folded piece of a torn receipt dated for the missing year, a clinic in Vermont. The total, $4,900, paid and cashed out the hospital, wasn't in Vermont. But maybe the decision was. She pocketed the receipt. Outside, a child laughed. Somewhere behind the wall, someone played. The piano, halting an unsure dot, the cracked teacup still sat on the table, lipstick fading. The silence in the room deepened, not absence, but something worse. She had been someone else, and someone had made sure she'd forget. The address smelled like rain and regret. The road had no name, just a gravel path clawing through damp pine and fog. She left her car at the edge, boots sinking into wet soil. There had once been a cabin here. Now there was only the husk of one roof collapsed, windows blackened, as if the house had inhaled a scream and never let it out. She stepped. Inside, the wood groaned under her weight, soft with rot. Sunlight filtered through ribs of char and smoke-stained beams. Her breath caught in her throat, not because of the ruin, but because something had survived the fire. Photos that pushed into cracked walls with rusty tacks. Nailed to support beams, some blistered by flame but intact enough to see her. Again, and again her face as a child in a yellow raincoat. Her at a birthday party she didn't remember. Her asleep in what looked like a hospital bed, an oxygen mask fogging over her lips. Dozens of her, yet none she recalled. Some photos had captions, faded ink scrawled on the backs and edges. Day 6, no crying today. Left hand twitched again. Dates that didn't match her memories. Or maybe it wasn't her memory. That was wrong. Maybe it was borrowed. A photo on the floor caught the light. Burned at one edge, edges curled like petals, but untouched in the center. Her at a swing set. Behind her, just a sliver of a man's shoulder gray wool, hand in mid-motion. She bent down. On the back, in looping pen, "You're still my anchor." She didn't know if she was shivering from cold or from something deeper. The closet door in the far corner hung loose on one hinge. She opened it like it might breathe. Inside, plastic, thick and sealed, hung like something embalmed. A wedding dress, cream once, now ghost gray. Lace scorched at one sleeve, blood, dried, brown and silent. She pressed her hand to the bag. The plastic crinkled, soft and warm from the sun overhead. There was something tucked into the bodice, a photo, folded small like a secret. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. A woman in a hospital gown, her face pale, hair damp. In her arms, a newborn. Its face turned toward her, mouth open as if in a cry or maybe a yawn. She didn't look scared. She looked tired, familiar, resigned. The name bracelet around her wrist read Jane Doe. She sat down hard on the floor, dressed beside her like a body. The name burned into her skin now, Jane Doe, anonymous, forgotten, stored away like an object. She had not been missing. She had been erased. The air shifted. A breeze passed through the broken frame of the house. She could smell smoke again. Beneath it, lipstick, familiar, the same shade her mother used. Once, on Sundays, careful not to let it smudge on china, she dug through the ash near the fireplace. A locket, buried in soot, opened with a snap. Inside, a torn photo. Half her mother's face, the other side sliced out, and a receipt. Dated years ago, from a hardware store. One item, vacuum sealer. Cash purchase. No name. She pocketed it without thinking. Something rattled in the rafters. A bird, maybe. Or memory, trying to crawl out. Her hands shook. Her voice didn't come. She tried to call someone, anyone, but no words left her throat. Just her breath. Ragged, uneven. The photo of the baby slipped from her hand and landed face down. She didn't flip it back. She COULDN single quotes T. Outside. The fog thickened. Branches moaned overhead, but the photo hid something worse. She looked again at the wall, at the man's shoulder in the swing set photo. Something in the pattern of the wool. A patch, military. A wristwatch with a square face, her father's watch. Except the man who raised her never wore one. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. The fire hadn't taken everything. It left behind what it wanted her to find. What someone needed her to see. The wedding dress slid off the chair and crumpled beside her like a body giving up. She didn't scream. She didn't move. The locket, still open, stared at her with half a face and all the silence in the world. The attic smelled like dusted cedar and memory, familiar, but not friendly. She stepped softly, the wooden planks groaning beneath her, as though reluctant to give up what they held. The bulb above flickered like it too was trying to forget. A box sat near the corner, unlabeled, its edges worn like something touched often and never understood. She knelt inside. A leather-bound journal, cracked at the spine, pages bloated with time and secrets. She opened to the middle somehow. The page already knew where her fingers would land. March 9th. The doctor says it's not memory loss, it's protection. She doesn't scream anymore, but she hums when it rains. She didn't remember humming. But lately, when storms rolled in and puddled light across her bedroom walls, she'd find herself whispering lullabies she didn't recognize. April 3rd. We gave the baby away. She can never know. She must never know. The ink on that sentence scratched deep, almost torn through the page. A second line followed, barely legible. Forgive me, Ruth. I saved her the only way I knew how. She clutched the journal like a wound. Her breath stuttered against the silence, trying to rise and failing. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. The sound felt out of place, too normal, too now. She stood slowly, the journal still open in her hand, her thumb resting over the word baby. The stairs creaked beneath her weight like confessionals. Slow and aching. The front door groaned open. He looked about 15. Tall but uncertain. The kind of tall that came too fast, before confidence had time to catch up. His hoodie was too thin for the weather. His eyes, no, her eyes. Same shade, same almond corners, same way of narrowing when afraid. He wasn't crying, but she felt it anyway, in her ribs like a scream without volume. Hi, he said, voice low. Are you Ruth? She couldn't answer. Her hand still gripped the journal. She tried to smile, but it came out crooked, like a scar trying to be a dimple, I think. He glanced down. I think you might be my mom. The journal slipped from her fingers and hit the floor spine first. The sound cracked like bone. She let him in. Not with words, with silence. He stepped inside like he'd done it in a dream, careful not to touch the edges. She led him to the kitchen, the one place that still felt real, and poured water from the kettle without asking if he wanted any. Her hands shook. A spoon clinked against the lip of the mug like Morse code. Neither of them spoke. He pulled something from his pocket. A photograph, bent at the corners. He slid it across the table. This was in the envelope, he said. They said it's all I was allowed to have. It was the hospital photo. The one she'd found online last week, time-stamped and undeniable. She holding a baby swaddled in blue. Her hair was wet. Her lips pale. She looked like someone who had just survived something she didn't yet understand. But the photo hid something worse. Her thumb hovered above the photo's corner, over the faint watermark. A name was scribbled in fading ink, Baby Doe. Not even a name, just placeholder grief. He drank the water slowly. I'm not here to mess anything up. I had to see you, just once. She noticed the scar beneath his ear. Small pink, almost gone. But she remembered the dream, a screaming infant, a rush of cold metal, a gloved hand pressing her down, and her father's words. The treatment. The erasure. She whispered. Did they? Were you hurt? He shrugged. I get headaches sometimes. They say it's nothing. She stood. Opened the drawer beneath the counter. Inside, under the paper napkins and expired coupons, was a locket. She hadn't known why she kept it. But she'd never thrown it away. Inside, a tiny print of that photo. Folded, fragile, whole. If justice still matters, she said softly, you'll want the next page. She placed it in his palm. His fingers curled around it slowly. I look like you, he said, barely a breath. You do, she answered, her voice breaking at the edges. He looked up. Did you name me? She opened her mouth. No word came. Outside, it started to rain, a soft percussion against the glass. She began to hum, and when he left, hours later, the journal lay face down on the floor. The final page fluttered open. Behind him, a single word scribbled in her father's trembling hand. Forgiven. The boy sat on the edge of her porch like he'd been told to wait, not by her, but someone long gone. Rain had traced a silver outline around his sneakers. He didn't flinch when she opened the door, just looked up with her father's eyes and a voice like smoke. He said you'd know what to do with this. His palm unfolded. A brass key, dulled at the edges like it had spent too long in too many pockets. She didn't reach for it, not yet. Not until she saw the scar on his wrist, a crescent shape that mirrored hers, like they'd both survived something stitched shut in silence. He wasn't her son. Not yet, but his presence pried open something caged. The key turned with an old click. Her father's desk exhaled the smell of dust and lavender polish. She had expected papers, maybe photos, or another lie tucked inside a folded napkin. But what she found was worse in its simplicity. A single VHS tape, labeled in her father's tight scrawl. Her wedding, do not watch. She turned it in her hands like it might bite. The boy stood behind her, silent. When she pressed it into the player, her fingers shook not from fear of what was on the tape, but from what might not be. She had no memory of a wedding. No white dress, no vows. Only a recurring dream of lipstick. Unbroken china and voices humming lullabies in reverse. The screen crackled. Then a frame blinked to life. A living room. Floral curtains. Her, younger but vacant-eyed, like someone playing dead in slow motion. A man beside her in a suit, smiling. Too wide, her father, adjusting the camera, laughing. A laugh she hadn't heard in 10 years, but that still made her ribs tighten. There were no guests, no rings, no sound. She leaned in, her heart a siren now, because she saw something behind her on the tape. A crib, but the photo hid something. Worse. The tape jumped. The camera dropped. Her father shouting, off-screen, then static. Then, for one frame only, a tiny hand curled around the rail of the crib, wearing the same hospital bracelet she once found in the attic. The name was scratched. Out. She ejected the tape with trembling hands. The boy hadn't moved. He stood like a question, or maybe a mirror. She wanted to ask him if he remembered a woman with long hair singing him to sleep. If anyone ever told him why lullabies make his throat burn. Instead, she offered him tea, because grief needs ceremony. He sat at the table, eyes tracing the rim of her mother's china cup. Lipstick ghosted its edge. Her color faded into time. What's your name? She asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a folded photo from his pocket. Torn down the middle, her face on one side, blank on the other. They told me she was dead, he said. But no one ever said who she was. She pressed her thumb to the torn edge. She remembered the photo. It used to be framed on her dresser until the night she threw it. The night before the hospital visit she was told never happened. One name stayed. One name vanished. But neither belonged to who she thought. She wanted to hug him. Instead, she reached for her necklace. The locket was heavier than it used to be. Inside, a baby's curl and a receipt for a motel she didn't remember staying in. Folded beneath them, a tiny USB dot. She didn't tell him what it was. Just slid it into her pocket and poured more tea. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. His fingers traced the scar again. He said I looked like her. She looked up. You do. Then silence. He stood to leave. She didn't stop him, but as he reached the door, he turned and said, "He cried when he gave me that key." She nodded once, her throat too tight to speak. After he left, she sat on the floor, held the torn photo against the cracked mirror, and wept, not for what was lost, but for what was planted and never told. Behind her, the TV screen still glowed. Faintly, frozen on a frame of her younger self holding a baby she was never told she had. The tape clicked in, soft and dry like a throat clearing in a funeral parlor. She didn't breathe. Dust flurried across the VHS screen, then held. A frozen frame, her in white, pale, not bridal. Drugged maybe. Her mouth moved but said nothing. Her eyes didn't track. Someone had placed lipstick on her, the shade she never wore, too red, too alive. A china teacup with the same smear rested now beside the television. She hadn't touched it in years. Her body on screen moved forward like a ghost tugged by wire. The man beside her wasn't holding her hand. He was holding her wrist. A priest said something muffled. No one clapped. Only one sound repeated faintly. Like rain on glass, her mother's crying. Silent, wet, contained. Behind a veil. She stood at the back in gray, not black, as if mourning something she didn't have permission to grieve. The boy watched from the edge of the couch, his shoulders curled inward, scar beneath his eye catching the blue flicker. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her fingers gripped the locket at her collarbone until the chain left a red indent. On screen, a document was lifted. She thought it might be vows until she saw her father sign it. The camera zoomed slightly. It wasn't a wedding license. It was a custody release. Her name scratched above the signature, the pen guided by someone else's hand. A man's hand. Somewhere in the room, the wallpaper cracked a little more. The same crack from Chapter 3, the one behind the photo. I wore white, she said, like the words had to taste bitter. But I never said yes. The boy didn't look at her. He was holding something now. A torn receipt, half faded. Her handwriting on the corner. A scribbled date. The same day as the tape. You were there, she whispered, as if the sentence had been hiding under her tongue for years. You were just in the other room. He didn't nod, he didn't blink. He just slid the receipt onto the table. Beside the china cup, one stain, two signatures. His birth name then crossed out, replaced by a new one. One name stayed. One name vanished. But neither belonged to who she thought. You remember it? She asked. Anything? He shook his head once, slow. Only the smell of bleach. And someone saying I cried too much. The tape hissed. Her on-screen self turned toward the man in the suit, her father. He wasn't smiling. He was sealing. She saw now. His hands trembled when he passed the document to the lawyer. He looked over his shoulder at the mother in gray. His mouth moved. Don't. For a flicker, he looked afraid. Not cruel, just cornered. The image jolted. Then cut to black. She stared at the screen like it might still breathe. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the wedding. That wasn't. The lullaby never sung. The name never taught to him. If I had screamed, she said, would they have stopped? But he didn't answer. He was looking at the torn photo in his hand now. It had fallen from the VHS case. Her. In white. Him in someone else's arms. And behind her reflection in the TV. Glass, a mirrored crack ran right through her face. She reached for the USB drive she'd hidden in the drawer years ago. The one labeled with her father's initials, not hers. She didn't know what it contained, but she would now. Some stories survive buried. Others wait. She turned to her mother standing in the hallway. Was I even awake when I lost him? The woman didn't speak. But her chin quivered, and she nodded once like it hurt. Outside, the wind knocked a shutter loose. Inside, her lipstick still stained the cup. And the locket sat open now, empty on the table, its photo long gone. She stood in the courthouse bathroom, brushing lipstick off her front tooth with a trembling finger. Her wrists, once marked by hospital tags and restraint bruises, were clean now, if not entirely healed. The mirror was cracked down the center, and her reflection split like a question she was still trying to answer. In her purse, a folded journal, a copy of the VHS tape, and a single page of a torn DNA report. She'd memorized the statistics. She'd memorized the ache. She remembered holding him, just once, on the day they took him. Jonah, she had whispered, before the sedative blurred his cry into the cotton walls. They'd called it a necessary break, She had called it theft. Years later, they'd renamed him Aaron. New family, new school, new story. But memory clung to the underside of things. A scar beneath a sleeve. A scent in the folds of a blanket, never truly washed clean. She didn't ask for her past. She claimed her future. The judge asked questions that felt like accusations stitched into courtesy. Why now? How do we know you're stable? How do we know you're not inventing grief for attention, for retribution, for regret? She let them talk. She didn't flinch when they called it complicated. She passed them the USB, the one she'd pocketed from her father's study the day before his stroke. It held scanned letters never sent, receipts never shredded, timestamps never erased. Her father had feared public disgrace more than he'd feared God. That fear became a ceremony dressed in ivory and lies. But the photo hid something worse. Outside, Jonah Aaron sat hunched on a wooden bench, a red string bracelet on his wrist. He picked at it like a scab, twisting it tighter with each minute that passed. His new mother had refused to come. His adoptive father had sent a lawyer. He came alone. She walked out with no verdict, just a temporary order and a future date. "Can I?" He paused. "Can I stay the night?" "You can stay forever," she said, and it wasn't a promise. It was a prayer spoken backward into time. In the apartment, she showed him the room she had kept ready. A bed too neatly made. A bookshelf lined with titles she thought he might have liked. A drawer of unopened toothbrushes just in case. He chose the blue one. Stood beside her at the sink. They brushed side by side, not speaking. Not yet. The locket she once wore hung from the mirror. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, a photo of her younger self on one side and an empty circle on the other. It had been waiting for his face. "You don't look like me," he said softly, staring at the reflection. "I know," she replied. "But you dream like me." One name stayed. One name vanished. But neither belonged to who she thought. He handed her the photo he'd found in the thrift store. The one of her in the wedding dress, eyes vacant, lips smiling in sedation. "Was this real?" he asked. "It was a performance," she said. "They called it love. It was legal paperwork." He didn't ask who they were. Maybe he already knew. Maybe the red string on his wrist was more than decoration. Maybe it was his tether to something he couldn't explain. He sat on the edge of the bed, shoelaces untied, one sock missing. She sat beside him, close but not touching. His breathing steadied before hers did. Some names are scars. Others become songs. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a drawing half crumpled, done in pencil and hesitation. A boy standing on a hill, holding a kite with no string. "I drew this after the first time I saw you," her voice caught. "And what did you think?" He looked down. "That maybe the wind had brought you back." Later, when the lights were off and the apartment was finally still, she tucked the journal beneath her pillow. The court date was in 4 weeks. The fight wasn't over. But something had begun. In the sink, 2 toothbrushes leaned toward each other. One blue, one white, not touching. Not yet. The shelves had changed. New owners, maybe. New lighting too bright. She still went every April, out of habit more than hope. The thrift store smelled like lemon cleaner and regret. Same cracked linoleum. Same tilt to the clock above the door, like time was always leaning left. 10 years ago, she found a wedding photo here. Her own face in a dress she'd never worn. That lie had ripped the rest of her life in two. But today, the aisles were just aisles. No photos, no ghosts. Just secondhand snow globes and chipped mugs that said "World's Best Dad." The bell jingled when she entered, the same sound from 10 Aprils ago. The same sound from the day everything changed. She didn't touch the frames anymore. She only looked. As if staring long enough could conjure memory out of someone else's dust. Her son waited by the door, 17 now. He didn't rush her. didn't question why she did this every spring. He was built like his father, but quiet like her. A soft shell, a watchful heart. She had told him part of the truth once. That someone took something from her and renamed it love. That she lost a child and found him again by accident. But not the full truth, not the names, not the scream she swallowed every time she looked at him. She ran her thumb along a porcelain teacup. Lipstick stain on the rim, her shade. Or close enough to pretend. She remembered using that color the day she testified. Voice shaking, but louder than she thought it could be. She didn't cry that day. She just pressed her lips together and spoke. "You okay?" Jonah asked. His voice deeper now. Still tender. She nodded. "Let's go." Outside, the clouds had gathered. A smell in the air, like something old waking up. They walked side by side. Their footsteps didn't match, but they rhymed. Halfway to the car, he stopped. "Do you want to meet him?" She turned. Her hands didn't know where to go. The question hit like a memory she hadn't earned. "I mean," Jonah said, "you always said his name like it hurt. I figured maybe if you saw him, it'd stop." She didn't answer. She looked past him. A man stood on the far sidewalk, gray coat. Rain spotting his shoulders. Hands by his sides, as if he didn't deserve pockets. He hadn't seen them yet. Or maybe he had and just didn't move. His profile was the same as the photo. A little older. A little smaller. The kind of man who used to lie with confidence. Now wearing the shape of someone who only told the truth to himself at night. She stepped forward, but the ground felt like it might give. The locket in her coat burned cold against her skin. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, the original photo. Torn at the corner, her wedding dress slicing into nothing. She had kept it not for him, but for proof. Some women keep love letters. Some keep evidence. He comes to town every April. Jonah said, "I found him last year, didn't tell you." Her breath snagged in her throat. "Why now?" "Because you stopped flinching when you say my name." She blinked. The rain reached her shoulders. A drop hit her lip, saltier than it should have been. He reached for her hand. His palm was warm, steady. She remembered the first time she held it, when he was still small enough to fit in her lap. When he didn't know what was missing, the man. Across the street looked up. And froze. For a second, none of them moved. Then Jonah let go of her hand and stepped forward. Not far, just enough to let the past see his face. Let it recognize what it lost. The man took a step back. No words. No apologies. Just the sound of her own breath, too loud in her ears. She didn't follow. She didn't wave. She reached into her coat, opened the locket, and let the rain touch the photo. Then she dropped it. The chain curled like a question on the pavement, and the wind didn't bother to pick it up.